So I want to share 3 books. I have many, many books, but these are 3 books. If you're just looking for some inspiration for homesteading, these books would do the trick. And even if you are not homesteading or maybe thinking about homesteading and just want to dabble in the looking, maybe I can share these 3 books. One is actually like a series, but these 3, I'll tell you about them as I go through them. They are not the only ones that I have and that I would recommend, but this is maybe just the beginning of just some inspiration. So the first one I will tell you about is, let's go with this one. This one you can find a lot now in stores, even Barnes and Noble in the gardening area. They will have this book, and it is The Backyard Homestead. And I think it's subtitle, our family doesn't even call it The Backyard Homestead. We actually call it the 1/4 Acre Homestead because in the very beginning, it has a homestead on 1/10 of an acre. And it has a little drawing and everything that you could put on that size land. And then it has the homestead on 1/10 of an acre, a 1/4 acre, and a 1/2 acre. So I know they call it the Backyard Homestead, but we don't even call it that. We call it the 1/4 Acre Homestead. I don't know why, but it's not on the front. That's not the subtitle, but that's what we call it. But I guess their subtitle is Produce All the Food You Need on Just a 1/4 Acre. So there you go. There's part of the 1/4 acre. So the 1/4 Acre Homestead is what we call it. Again, the title of the actual book is The Backyard Homestead, which is awesome because if you have a backyard, why not? See what you can do. Now, all of these books, there's no book you're going to get that you're going to follow it from front to back and never like adapt to your own situation. So take all the books that you can find and just use them for what you can do. That is one thing about any of the homestead books or any book that is recommended. You know, your area, your family, your conditions, they're all different. And sometimes it doesn't always work perfectly for your situation. So even if you don't want to do everything in this book, I always go back to it just for inspiration. Now, the drawings in it are not color. The cover is color. But sometimes I think just having sketching and drawings, see if I can find something. Okay, so there's a goat that are not real life pictures are really kind of neat because I don't know, maybe that's a little more creative, and I appreciate the creative side of someone putting together a book. I do like real pictures at times, but sometimes it has that old-fashioned feel whenever you have sketches and things like that someone put, like here we have pruning, it's just sketches, how to prune, but they have all sorts of things in here, not just garden, but animals. It has animal stuff, it has garden stuff. Sometimes all we need is inspiration. We don't necessarily want someone telling us, do this, then that, then that. Sometimes we do, but not always. Like when we have our own dream and what we want to do, and we get bogged down and maybe feel overwhelmed or things aren't going great, really, you don't necessarily want instructions. You just want inspiration. And this is one of those many books that I go to just to kind of going back to the basics, which is actually another book. Anyway, I've actually bought this book and given it to people who think they want a homestead but don't know that they have the space for it or think they need to move or any of that kind of stuff. This is like my book. I have bought several and mailed them to people just to say you don't have to have a huge farm in order to homestead. You just have to have the mindset for it. So that is one book that I usually go back to, even for inspiration, especially when things are going not so great and I just need a little pickup. So this book is called Living the Good Life by Linda Cockburn, subtitle Tried and Tested Strategies for Sustainable Living, How One Family Changed Their World from Their Own Backyard. And it's somewhat of a diary because she goes in like the the different days. Now, these folks were in Australia, so they had a challenge for themselves of not spending any money, I think. It's been years since I read it, but I still think about them. So their season is different than my season, being in Australia and then us being in the States. So their journey started, I think, in a January, which would be our cold month and their warmer month, I think. So it just went through all the different things on not spending any money and being more sustainable and just different things they had to deal with. And then they even have in the end like some Q&A kind of stuff and like some health things that like going to the doctor and getting a checkup, things like that. But from what I remember, and it has been years, and occasionally having actual real pictures is good in the right context of a book. So from what I remember, their backyard was like a food forest. And I remember, their son going out and just getting something, maybe a watermelon or something, and just eating it. Like, how cool is that? So again, this book is just inspiring that, just to read someone else's story, just to know that someone else, even if they don't do that forever, they did it for a while, and, what their story was and what they got out of it. And it's been more than a few years since I've read this, and it would be kind of neat to follow up on that. But that's just an inspiring story of people that they started off with no money, like they didn't want to spend any money, and then they were just going to grow everything. And hopefully that was a little bit of a capsule of what that book was about. But I appreciated reading about their journey. And also, I remember she's from New Zealand. So I did learn that New Zealanders, they call them Kiwis, that Kiwis, people from New Zealand, or maybe it's Australia. No, I'm confusing myself. Anyway, they call chicks, baby chicks, chickens, they call them chooks. And I was like, what in the world are they talking about? What's a chook? So I learned what a chook is. And one time we took a trip, and we were actually in Hawaii, and we took this little tour. We were going to go canoeing or something. And my husband and I, we were on the bus with all these other people that were going to go do some sort of excursion or something. And there were some folks on the bus with their children. And in Hawaii, there are kind of like feral chickens, basically, and they're everywhere. And they just run all over. Like, truly, we saw a rooster and a hen on the beach. Like, it was so cool. I was like, wow, oh, poor chickens, they have it bad, right? They're on the Hawaii beach. Anyway, so on that bus, that family, I could hear the little kids looking out the window. Oh, Mom, look at the chooks, look at the chooks. It's like, oh my gosh, I know what that word is. So anyway, that's about that book. So the third one is more of a series, and this is a little more inspiring. And back in Georgia, when I was doing Bible study there, I had one of the attending's wives out of the blue, because we were living in a cul-de-sac in Georgia, and then we were moving out into the country. So I can't remember exactly where I was in the process of on the Georgia side or South Carolina side. But anyway, this attending's wife, we're from the same town in South Georgia, but she came up to me out of the blue one day and brought me 3 of these, because this is a series. She brought me the first 3 books of Foxfire. And that was like just Christmas, because I love books. Our family loves books. And I don't think I had ever heard of Foxfire. And so it was interesting just to kind of open it up. And I remember one night, now I think the project was like high schoolers, or they're maybe like journalists kind of thing. And they were to go out into the mountains and interview the mountain folk and get their take and what they do and how they survive and all that kind of thing. And again, there's several books. This one's the first one, and they all have something else. They have like a list of all kinds of different things. And even if they have one thing like soap making, they'll have multiple people being interviewed and how they do their process of soap making or whatever. But I remember one night, no, maybe we were in South Carolina, because I remember I was like, okay, I need to read some of this book. Now, mind you, my kids were still young, and, looking at pictures and doing little captions was one thing, but to actually read a book was a little harder for me at that time. But I remember opening one of the books, and I don't even remember which one it was. And these were all in the mountains. So I grew up in South Georgia. I was not taught to call it Appalachian, but that is what the native folk here in the mountains call it, Appalachian Mountains. So they went to the Appalachian Mountains of Northeast Georgia. And I think it all started in like the early 70s. So back to grabbing one of the books, and I was starting to read when I was tucking, I think, some of the girls in bed. And I don't know if we were each reading or if I was reading it aloud. If I had to guess, I'd say I was reading it out loud, but I had to kind of stop, because when you get to the parts where the actual Appalachian folks are telling their story or how they're doing their process or whatever it is that they're talking about, they typed it phonetically. So they didn't type it the way proper English nowadays reading a book. They typed it how they said it. And I got so choked up because it was like talking to our regular country folk. And, sometimes us country folk, we can talk like, this is as proper as you're going to get me. I mean, I don't think I can get much better than this kind of talk. I can go the other way, but when I was reading their words, the way they were saying them, I got so choked up because it was like I was talking to home folk. So anyway, some of this stuff you're not going to find, again, everything in each one, and no one needs to do all of these things, but it's almost like a reference book and an inspirational book and a kind of series. So they do have real pictures, and they do show some of the high schoolers that did the interviews and what they were even using in the wood cook stoves. But I believe all the pictures, I don't think I have every single one, but I have a decent amount of Foxfire books. And all the ones I have, at least, they're all black and white pictures, which is kind of cool. But even if you don't want to do any of these activities or projects that they kind of cover, man, you can really look at this. I mean, even me, and I've done plenty of the things in them. It's like, you know what? We really, really have no reason to complain. I mean, this was life. This was how you survived. And people appreciated it. Most of the time, they didn't complain about it, Not always, but a lot of times people didn't complain about it. This was just how you lived. This was how you survived. This is how you kept going. This is how you passed on, traditions and skills and knowledge and stories and history of your family. Not the books, but what they did, what they were telling them about, their lives and how they lived. And they were able to capture it and put it in a book. I mean, even that is pretty amazing to me. No matter how you slice it, it's just neat that it's actually preserved, And then even some of the pictures, if you're like me, sometimes I can't just read something. I actually need a picture or a video to kind of show me. I remember when I was learning how to knit from a book, like Teach Yourself to Knit kind of book, and it didn't have the pictures for me. It had a few pictures, but where I was getting stuck, it didn't have a picture. This is a side note. And I could read the words, but I couldn't understand what it meant in my hands, And ironically, I was reading it, and it was my husband who was like, okay, I think it's saying do this. And I did that, and then it was like, oh, okay. Of course you get all the words. I get the more pictures, and he gets the more words. Actually, he gets all of it. But yeah, the Foxfire books, they cover different types of things. Some of it's gardening, some of it's canning, some of it's more animal processing or, planting or whittling. I love finding things where people build their own log houses. And one of the things, I think it's in this one, the first one, they would do shakes and shingles. So there's a difference between shakes and shingles, if you didn't know that. So one has to do with like their angle, I think. So you'd put them on your roof, and that would be your roof, or you could put it on your siding of your house or your cabin, and that would be the shakes and shingles. Um, but yeah, how to make them by hand. You didn't need a machine. You could just, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what that's tools for. I've seen that a million times, antique shops, flea markets, you name it. And that, sometimes that's helpful to be able to just have some inspiration on how things were. And if there's anything that you think of that you might want to dabble in it, it's there. It's a reference book. It's an inspirational book to me, especially if I want to get some country talk going. I could just open these books and start reading. But those are just 3 books if you need some sort of inspiration. Again, any book that you pick up that's going to be about homesteading or gardening or anything, don't think of them as like, do them A to Z. Think of them as like your inspiration and your guidance. They are not necessarily all or none. So anyway, those are the books. Foxfire series, Living the Good Life, based in Australia, I believe. And then the one I have bought several times for all sorts of people is the Backyard Homestead, which we call the Quarter Acre Homestead book. So maybe that will help you. And even if you go to the bookstore and just kind of skim through them, good enough, right? Because then you're surrounded by all these other books, which we actually appreciate in our house. We have a book problem. So, okay, I'll see you next time.